Joe Louis, the WW2 boxer who fought 2 wars, in the ring for glory and on the front for freedom. The rhythmic sound of fists colliding with leather echoed through the dimly lit gym, a symphony of determination and grit. Detroit, Michigan, 1940, a city teetering on the edge of transformation, its skyline punctuated by the chimneys of bustling factories, exhaling clouds of smoke into the crisp autumn air. The scent of engine oil mingled with the faint aroma of sweat and hard work, a testament to a community laboring tirelessly for a brighter future. Yet, beneath the surface of this industrious facade, tension simmered, fueled by the undercurrents of economic strife and social inequality. What does it mean to fight for glory when the world is engulfed in chaos? Can one man's victory in the ring serve as a beacon of hope amid the shadows of war? These questions loomed large in the mind of Joe Louis, a boxer whose fists were as powerful as his resolve. He was known not just for his prowess but for the humble spirit that accompanied him everywhere. Born to a family that understood struggle, Joe had become a symbol of aspiration for many, particularly within the African American community. His broad shoulders and chiseled jawline reflected his dedication to the sport, but it was his heart that truly resonated with the people. As he trained, each punch he threw against the heavy bag was a testament to his dreams. He could envision the championship title glimmering in the spotlight, the cheers of the crowd echoing in his ears. Yet, every strike also bore the weight of expectation. With every jab and hook, Joe battled a relentless opponent, one that extended beyond the canvas of the boxing ring. The social climate of the time whispered doubts into his ear, reminding him of the heavy burden he carried as a black athlete in a racially divided nation. The title of heavyweight champion was not merely a trophy, it was a representation of hope, a chance to shatter the ceilings imposed by society. Maggie Carter, Joe's best friend and an aspiring journalist, stood at the edge of the ring, her brow furrowed in concentration as she scribbled notes in her worn leather notebook. She shared Joe's passion for justice and equality, believing that every story deserved to be told, every struggle acknowledged. The world outside the gym was a swirl of headlines and images, a reflection of a country spiraling toward war. Maggie was determined to capture the essence of Joe's journey, to chronicle not just his rise in the boxing world but the battles he faced as a black man in America. "Joe," she called out, her voice breaking through the rhythmic thuds. "How does it feel knowing you're so close to the title? You're not just fighting for yourself, you're fighting for all of us." Joe paused, wiping the sweat from his brow, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "It feels heavy, Maggie," he admitted, his tone serious. "I want to win, but I also feel like I'm standing on the shoulders of everyone who came before me. What if I fail? What if I let them down?" Outside the gym, the city buzzed with the anticipation of change. News of the war across the ocean seeped into every corner of Detroit. Young men were being drafted, called to serve a country that often turned a blind eye to their struggles. Amid this backdrop, the pressure on Joe intensified. He was not just a boxer, he was a symbol, a warrior in a fight that transcended the ring. But could one man's victory truly mean freedom for all? His rival, Frankie the Hammer Darnell, stood as a constant reminder of the stakes. Frankie was charismatic, charming the media and the public alike. He relished the spotlight, relishing the role of the fierce competitor. But beneath the bravado, Frankie too felt the weight of expectation as the world watched their impending clash. For him, the ring was a sanctuary, a place to prove himself against the odds. As Joe entered the ring for another training session, the atmosphere crackled with energy. The gym was alive with the sounds of boxing gloves hitting pads, trainers shouting encouragement, and the distant hum of the city outside. Joe's brow furrowed in concentration, his fists dancing in the air as he visualized each opponent he might face, not just in boxing but in life. Yet, a nagging thought consumed him. Would he be willing to lay down his dreams for the greater good? Would he step into the line of fire, not just in the ring, but for the freedoms of those who looked to him as a beacon of hope? As he landed a powerful right hook, the impact resonated not just through the heavy bag but deep within his soul. He was fighting 2 wars, one for the title, and another that raged silently, one that questioned the very essence of his identity as an athlete and as a man. In that moment, with sweat dripping down his face and the world holding its breath, Joe Louis knew he stood at a crossroads. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, but it was a fight worth engaging in, not just for himself, but for the millions who believed that his victory could ignite change. And as he continued to train, the echoes of the impending war grew louder, reminding him that the battles we choose often define who we are. Would he rise to the occasion, or would the weight of expectation prove too heavy to bear? The answer lay ahead, waiting to be discovered in the heart of a boxer who was about to change the world. The rhythmic sound of fists colliding with leather echoed through the dimly lit gym, a symphony of determination and grit. Detroit, Michigan, 1940. A city teetering on the edge of transformation, its skyline punctuated by the chimneys of bustling factories, exhaling clouds of smoke into the crisp autumn air. The scent of engine oil mingled with the faint aroma of sweat and hard work, a testament to a community laboring tirelessly for a brighter future. Yet, beneath the surface of this industrious city, tension simmered, fueled by the pressures of a world at war and the fight for equality at home. Joe Louis stood in the center of the ring, his gloved hands dancing through the air as he shadowboxed, each jab and hook a testament to his skill and grit. His body moved with a grace that belied the weight of expectation resting on his shoulders. Outside the gym, the world was changing rapidly, news of the war in Europe dominated the headlines, and young men were being called to serve their country. In Joe's mind, a storm brewed, a conflict that echoed the chaos around him. "Hey, champ!" Frankie the Hammer Darnell's voice broke through Joe's concentration. The charismatic rival loomed at the edge of the ring, a smirk plastered on his face. "You training for your big fight or just trying to dodge the draft?" Joe paused, sweat trickling down his brow, irritation flashing in his eyes. "You think this is a joke, Frankie? People are dying out there." "Oh, I'm well aware," Frankie replied, stepping closer, the bravado in his voice tinged with an unexpected seriousness. "But you know what they're saying? If Joe Louis can knock out the Nazis, he can knock out anyone. You're our hope, man. You can't just walk away from that." Frankie's words hung heavy in the air, and Joe's heart raced. The pressure to represent not only himself but the entire African-American community weighed on him like a leaden blanket. Every time he stepped into the ring, he fought for more than just a title. He fought for dignity, for justice, for a chance at equality in a society that often denied it. But with each punch he threw, the reality of the draft loomed larger, an inescapable reminder of the war that was pulling at the fabric of his life. As Joe left the gym that day, he found Maggie Carter waiting outside, her notebook poised, ready to capture the essence of his struggle. "Joe, can we talk?" she asked, her voice a mix of urgency and concern. "I want to write about what this fight means for you and for everyone watching." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Maggie, I don't know if I can. I'm not just fighting for the title, I'm fighting against something bigger. What if I can't win? What if I'm seen as a failure?" "Failure? Joe, you're already a champion to so many. But what I want to know is, are you considering enlisting?" Maggie's eyes searched his face for a hint of the truth. Joe looked away, his mind racing. The thought of joining the armed forces had crossed his mind more than once. He had friends who had already signed up, friends who believed that fighting for freedom abroad was as crucial as the fight for equality at home. But the idea of leaving the ring, of abandoning his career, gnawed at him. "I'm torn," he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "This title is everything I've worked for. But then, there's the war. I can't ignore it." Maggie nodded, understanding flashing in her eyes. "You're not just a boxer, Joe. You're a symbol. But being a symbol also comes with a choice. You have to decide what kind of legacy you want to leave." Just as the weight of her words sunk in, a group of young men passed by, their faces alight with excitement but also tinged with fear. They were fresh recruits, eager to serve their country. Joe's heart sank. He was the same age as them, yet he was caught in a battle of his own. While they prepared to risk their lives on the front lines, he grappled with the pressure to uphold the hopes of his community. "Joe," one of the recruits called out, a wide grin on his face. "You're gonna be our champ, right? Show those Nazis what real strength looks like." The words hit Joe like a punch to the gut. How could he be a champion in the ring when so many were sacrificing their lives for a cause he felt conflicted about? He turned back to Maggie, the uncertainty etched on his face. What if I can't live up to their expectations? Maggie stepped closer, her expression softening. You will never know unless you try. Whether in the ring or on the battlefield, you have the power to inspire. But you have to choose where you believe you can make the most impact. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city, Joe felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. It was not just about boxing anymore, it was about identity, purpose, and the fight for respect and justice. The world outside the ring was demanding his attention, and he could no longer ignore it. Okay, I'll think about it, he said finally, his resolve wavering but alive. But I can't make any promises. Maggie gave him a warm smile, sensing the internal battle raging within him. That's all I ask. Just think about it. As they walked away from the gym, the sound of the city thrumming around them, Joe's mind raced with thoughts of the future. He couldn't escape the reality that was closing in on him. The draft would soon take many young men, and he felt a pull towards a cause that transcended boxing. As tensions mounted and the war continued to escalate, Joe found himself at a crossroads. Would he step into the spotlight as a champion, a beacon of hope for his people? Or would he take a different path, one that led him into the heart of the battle for freedom? The conflict deepened, enveloping him in a whirlwind of choices that would define not only his career but also his legacy. With each passing day, the roar of the crowd grew louder, but the cries of those serving in the trenches echoed even more profoundly in his heart. As the screen fades to black, a voiceover calls to the viewers, what would you choose if you were in Joe's shoes? Should he fight for glory or fight for freedom? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more on this compelling journey of courage and sacrifice. The weight of the world bore down on Joe Louis as he paced the narrow confines of the barracks, the air thick with the smell of sweat and unwashed uniforms. The rhythmic cadence of boots marching on the gravel outside echoed his own racing heartbeat. Here he was, a warrior, yet the battlefield felt far removed from the ring he had trained so hard to conquer. Today was not just another day, it was a decision day, one that would shape not only his life but the lives of those who looked up to him. The war had transformed him in ways he never anticipated. The sounds of gunfire and the cries of wounded soldiers filled his dreams, haunting him even in moments of fleeting peace. He was no longer just Joe Louis, the boxer, he was Joe Louis, the soldier. And the weight of that title pressed heavily upon his shoulders. As he stared out the window, the image of his hometown flickered in his mind, Detroit, a city of dreams and despair, where the hope of a nation seemed to clash with the harsh reality of discrimination and inequality. He could hear the echoes of the crowd cheering for him, their voices blending into a cacophony of expectation. They believed in him, and he had fought for them, for their dreams, for a brighter tomorrow. But now, he stood at a crossroads. "Joe, you okay?" a voice broke through his reverie. It was Frankie the Hammer Darnell, his former rival now standing beside him as a fellow soldier. The camaraderie of shared experiences had forged a bond between them, yet the remnants of their past rivalry lingered like an unspoken tension. "I don't know, Frankie. I thought joining up would make things clearer. But it feels like I'm in a different ring, one where the stakes are much higher," Joe replied, his voice barely a whisper. Frankie's brow furrowed, his expression shifting from concern to understanding. "You ain't just fighting for yourself anymore. Out here, it's about the team, the brothers beside you. You're fighting for something bigger." Joe's fists clenched instinctively, the urge to fight rising within him. "But what does it matter? We're out here risking our lives, and the same people who cheer for me in the ring would turn their backs on me out here just because of the color of my skin." Frankie nodded, the weight of the shared truth settling heavily between them. "It's a different battle, Joe. One we're all fighting, whether we like it or not. But you know what? You can change that. You can show them what it means to be a champion." The conversation lingered in Joe's mind as he lay on his bunk that night, staring at the ceiling. Memories of the ring flooded back, his training sessions, the cheers from the crowd, the pressure of expectation. Yet, the image of his brothers in arms, the men who had become family in this foreign land, weighed even more heavily on his heart. They were fighting for their lives, for freedom, for a future they might never see. With the dawn came the clarity of purpose. Joe knew what he had to do. He would not let the world dictate his life or his choices. He decided to enlist fully in the cause, to join the fight for something greater than himself. He would take the lessons learned in the ring and apply them here, in the trenches of war. "Let's do this," he declared to Frankie, determination etched across his face. But the decision was not met with universal approval. As news of his enlistment spread, whispers of betrayal followed him like shadows. Some in the community felt he was abandoning them, that he was turning his back on the fight for equality in favor of a battle that seemed far removed from their struggles. The media painted him as a traitor, a man who had forsaken his chance at glory for military service. The day of deployment arrived, and as Joe stood with his fellow soldiers, a familiar face appeared among the ranks: "Frankie. We're in this together, Joe. You fight for them, I fight for you," he said, a fierce determination in his eyes. They stood shoulder to shoulder, ready to face whatever awaited them. The plane ride to the front felt like a blur, a cacophony of noise and uncertainty. As they touched down, Joe was struck by the stark reality of war: muddy trenches, the smell of gunpowder, and the distant sounds of artillery fire. This was not the glamorous life of a boxer, this was raw, brutal, and terrifying. As the days turned into weeks, the harshness of combat became a daily reality. Joe witnessed the courage and sacrifice of his comrades, each moment reinforcing the notion that this war was not just about winning, it was about survival, about brotherhood, and about fighting for the rights that had been denied to them for far too long. One fateful day, amidst the chaos of battle, Joe found himself face to face with an enemy soldier. The moment felt surreal, like a scene from a movie. His heart raced as he grappled with the man, both of them fighting for their lives. In that instant, they were no longer enemies but two men caught in the tide of war, each with a story, each with a reason for fighting. As they struggled, Joe caught a glimpse of the soldier's face and froze. There was something familiar about him. And then the realization hit him like a punch to the gut. It was Frankie. They had fought for their country, only to find themselves as adversaries on this battlefield. The weight of their past rivalry hung heavily in the air, but now it was tinged with the understanding of shared hardship. "Joe, it's me. It's Frankie," he shouted, panic rising in his voice as the reality of the situation settled in. The two men separated, both breathing heavily, hearts racing. "What the hell, Frankie? What are you doing here?" Joe exclaimed, confusion and relief flooding his senses. "I was drafted, just like you. We're fighting the same war, Joe. We're on the same side." Frankie's voice was urgent, filled with the raw urgency of their situation. As the battle raged on around them, Joe's perspective shifted completely. He realized that their rivalry had been trivial in the face of the larger fight for freedom and equality, not just for themselves but for all those who had been oppressed. They were all fighting for a future where the color of one's skin would not dictate one's worth or opportunities. In the heat of the battle, the two men joined forces, their past rivalry now a distant memory as they fought side by side. The chaos of war receded, replaced by a sense of camaraderie and purpose. They were not just fighting for their lives, they were fighting for each other and for a cause that transcended their individual struggles. As the skirmish subsided and the dust settled, Joe returned to the barracks, his heart heavy with the weight of realization. He understood now that his fight for glory in the ring had to extend beyond that confined space. He would return to Detroit not just as a champion of boxing but as a champion for civil rights, a voice for those who had been silenced. With a newfound sense of purpose, Joe began to write letters, sharing his experiences with Maggie back home. He poured his heart into the words, hoping they would inspire others to see the fight for equality in a new light, to understand that the battle for justice was not just fought with fists but with hearts and minds. He envisioned a future where his victories in the ring could be mirrored by victories in the struggle for civil rights. As he penned the final words of his letter, Joe felt a surge of hope. He would return to the ring not just as a boxer but as a warrior for justice, ready to fight for the freedom and equality that every human being deserved. And with that, he knew his journey was far from over. The ring awaited him, a new battle was on the horizon, one that would unite a community, give voice to the voiceless, and ultimately change the course of history. The rhythmic sound of fists colliding with leather echoed through the dimly lit gym, a symphony of determination and grit. Detroit's essence seeped into every corner of Joe Louis's life. He had stepped back into the ring, a place that felt simultaneously familiar and foreign after his time away. The air was thick with anticipation as he prepared for the biggest fight of his life, the heavyweight championship title. Yet this time, he wasn't just fighting for personal glory, he was fighting for something much larger. As the day of the championship approached, the weight of his dual identity pressed heavily on his shoulders. Joe was no longer just a boxer, he was a symbol of resilience for countless African Americans facing discrimination and hardship. The war had changed him, had opened his eyes to the struggles faced by his brothers in arms and back home. He had learned that true strength lay not only in physical prowess but in the ability to inspire hope and instigate change. The night of the fight arrived, and the arena was packed with an electrified audience. Fans, journalists, and dignitaries filled the seats, their eyes glimmering with expectation. Joe stepped into the ring, a silence enveloping him as he surveyed the crowd. His heart raced. Not merely from adrenaline but from the knowledge of what this moment represented. He recalled the faces of his fellow soldiers, the sacrifices they made, and the dreams they held dear. He could hear the distant echoes of Maggie's voice urging him to never forget the purpose behind his punches. His opponent, the reigning champion, stood across the ring, a formidable figure who cast a long shadow. The bell rang, and the crowd erupted into a cacophony of cheers and shouts. Joe moved forward, his training kicking in. Each jab and cross felt like both a tribute and a battle cry. As the rounds progressed, the tension mounted. The champion was relentless, employing every tactic to maintain his title. Yet, Joe's spirit etched a different narrative. Each blow he delivered was a testament to his journey, a blend of his past struggles with the hopes for a better future. As the fight reached its climax, Joe found himself cornered, the champion pressing hard. Doubt crept in like a thief in the night, whispering that victory might slip through his fingers. But in that moment, he remembered the faces of those he fought for, the soldiers who had believed in him, the children who looked up to him, and the community that rallied behind him. It was this realization, this profound connection to his purpose, that reignited his fire. With a sudden burst of energy, Joe broke free from the corner and launched a series of punches that seemed to echo through the very fabric of the arena. Each hit resonated with a promise of hope, equality, and the fight for justice. The champion faltered, and with one final, powerful uppercut, Joe sent him crashing to the canvas. The crowd erupted into a frenzy, their cheers drowning out everything else. Joe stood there, panting, heart racing, yet filled with a sense of peace and fulfillment. As the referee raised his hand, declaring him the new heavyweight champion, it wasn't just a personal victory but a victory for all who had ever felt marginalized, overlooked, or oppressed. Joe Louis had transformed from a mere athlete into a beacon of hope, a voice for the voiceless. He was no longer just a boxer, he was now an advocate for change, a warrior both in the ring and in life. After the fight, as the lights dimmed and the crowd began to disperse, Joe stepped away from the limelight for a moment of reflection. He found Maggie waiting for him, her eyes shining with pride. "You did it, Joe. You didn't just win, you inspired a generation," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Thanks, Maggie," Joe replied, his voice steady yet filled with gratitude. "But this is just the beginning. We have so much more to fight for. The ring was just one battleground, there are many more out there." With a renewed sense of purpose, Joe began to speak out publicly about the social injustices that plagued his community. He used his platform to advocate for civil rights, attending rallies, and speaking alongside leaders who were also striving for change. His journey became not just about boxing but about lifting others up, using his fame to ignite conversations that needed to happen. As he stood before crowds, sharing his story, Joe Louis became a role model not just for aspiring athletes but for every individual yearning for equality and justice. His story resonated with many, showing that true champions are those who fight not just for themselves but for the greater good. This tale of courage, resilience, and transformation serves as a reminder that we all have the power to affect change in our own ways, regardless of the battles we face. Joe Louis's journey teaches us that the fight for justice is ongoing and that every act of courage, no matter how small, contributes to the larger struggle for equality. As we conclude this inspiring story, we invite you to reflect on the power of your own voice and actions. What battles will you choose to fight? How can you be a champion for those without a voice? If Joe's story inspired you, we encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button if you believe in the power of change, and subscribe to our channel to join us on this journey of exploration, resilience, and inspiration. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could ignite a spark in your heart. Together, let's continue to fight for a world where everyone has the opportunity to rise and shine. Remember, the fight for justice begins with us. Thank you for being part of this journey.